Welcome, Keith, to the show. Really glad to have you here. I don't think we've had a financial czar like yourself on the show before in regards to business credit. Really want to hear what you have to say. Please let the audience know what you're up to, what your background is, and let's dive in.
Very good. David, my name's Keith. I'm with Credit Suite. I run our affiliate programs, and I'm an account executive, work with a lot of business owners every day to help them build their business credit and get funding without a personal guarantee. And that's our primary focus of what we do. Is we focus on empowering business owners to really take control of their business by getting funding and protecting themselves from having to personally guarantee, use their social security number for getting financing and for running their business.
I thought that was like virtually impossible for entrepreneurs to get any type of business funding without a personal guarantee.
Virtually impossible? No, it's not impossible, but you've just got to know how the game works. So just like you and I have a personal credit score, your business has a credit score as well. So they have a credit report. It's ran through Equifax, Experian, and Dun & Bradstreet are the three major credit bureaus that report for your business. Now, getting funding for the businesses is a little more difficult. There's more obstacles that you have to jump through. There's what we like to call our magic formula that we take clients through to be able to get them to that point where you can actually get funding. You can get lines of credit, bank loans without the personal guarantee. People think it's impossible because for a long time there was nobody who had really cracked the system, and that's what we have focused on. And we've been doing it for about 12 years. We've helped thousands of clients do this, and I think we just passed the $1 billion funding mark for a lot of our clients and helping them get lines of credit over $1 billion.
Wow. So in this time of economic uncertainty, are you like without any business to do because nobody has any credit, or are you working all hours of the day, every day?
All hours of the day, every day, all night. It seems like our phone has not stopped ringing since everything's happened, and rightfully so, because what we're finding is that right now Americans are looking at it, and they're if they're fortunate enough to be working from home, they're finding they got a lot more time on their hands, and they're starting to look at some of the things that they're doing. Not being out as much, people are starting to turn to what they really love doing. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of people who are starting to open up real estate investment companies, entrepreneurs who are doing like mobile food. And what we're seeing that's really neat and really encouraging through all this is people are being very creative and innovative with their talents and finding really cool ways to give back to their communities and be actively engaged and working. Like I was talking with a local business owner here in my area that they're doing food delivery for the elderly. And so the people who are locked in, who are shut in, that they're not able to get out and be able to get their groceries or even get food, they're just cooking food for them, kind of like a Meals on Wheels. It's just they're running it as a nonprofit organization. So we're having a lot of fun seeing what people are doing in the communities, how they're taking advantage of just kind of the change in the economic system, the change in what's going on, and watching how they're being innovative. But we're finding more than ever that people are very cognizant of paying attention to what's going on with their finances and protecting themselves and willing to get out there and do something to make money. But they're wanting to be safe about it and be smart about it and start figuring out how to structure their business so that they can run it and operate it without a personal guarantee. So busy wise, yeah, we're very busy right now.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, that it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, that certain people are saying, okay, maybe they had closed down a business, maybe they had retired, but it sounds like some people are saying, I had this business, not going to work in this environment, let it die. And now I can shift and move to something better. Is that what I'm hearing? Or are these all people that weren't doing anything and all of a sudden they're going to start doing something?
It's a combination of both. We're finding that a lot of people who have been running businesses and have been doing a great job, who are pivoting, are even looking at this going, hey, we want to separate and we want to protect ourselves financially by separating our personal from our business. And we see a lot of prospects and a lot of our clients that are coming to us in that side. But the other side is a lot of people who are getting started in business, a lot of people who are looking at starting up new ventures, or maybe they've been at it for a year. Really, our primary primary target audience of who we're working with are startups to maybe about 10 to 15 employees. They're running maybe under $5 million annually, and focused on, it's more of a small business style shops than it is the large corporations.
Yeah, so they've got some track record they can build on. What are some of the criteria that come up that make a company an ideal candidate for your services where they can get funding from you easier, faster, or at all versus, other routes that they've tried in the past?
Well, that's a great question. We're not actually concerned about criteria except for making sure that they're not a restricted business. So, like the cannabis shops that are opening up, liquor stores, the high risk industries that are typically high risk for any type of lending, any type of loans. So, and the reason this is, David, is because we're not loaning money. We're building a credit profile so they can access lines of credit. So what we've done is we've gone through about 1,400 lenders and vendors and banks and loan companies and went through and filtered them out based on two criteria. The first one is we wanted to make sure they would report to the Business Credit Bureau, so Equifax, Experian, and Dun& Bradstreet. But the second one is that they would only require an EIN signature, so no personal guarantee. And so with that, we found that only about 7% of all the lenders out there, whether these are, individual vendors, whether these are banks with lines of credit, credit card companies, only 7% of them actually met those two criteria. So what we did is we categorized those into 4 different tiers. Tier 1 being the easiest to get qualified for, Tier 4 being the hardest to get qualified for. After we came up with this list and we've broken it down, then we took it and we reverse engineered the process. So we sat down and we looked at it and we're like, okay, what do all of these vendors have in common? What are the common denominators between all of them that are letting them open up their wallets and loan our clients money? And so what we did is we figured out the secret formula to be able to help businesses get set up properly from the beginning to be able to qualify themselves. Now, David, one thing I like to ask people, I know when I turned 18, no banks were giving me like $50,000 lines of credits or credit cards or anything like that. Did you ever get an offer like that?
No, no.
No, nobody does, because banks don't do that. And it's the same thing with the business. Just because you have a business doesn't mean that a bank's going to loan you $50,000, even 100, even $10,000 just because you have an EIN number and you're a company. That's not how banking works. That's not how the credit system works. So knowing that, what we've done is we take our clients through a strategic process to be able to help them get everything set up front, make sure that the information is right with the credit bureaus, and then start applying for tier 1 vendors. Now, these aren't going to be pretty accounts. This may be like $1,000 line of in-house line of credit, or a net 30 account with Quill, or with Granger, or an office supply company. These aren't going to be life-changing, but they are credit changing. And what we're doing is we're establishing a credit history. So we'll work and we work with our clients to help them to make some payments, find some items, utilize it inside of their business. So one, they're starting to improve their cash flow. And so instead of having to pay out of their pocket every month, now or every time they have a transaction, now they're starting to utilize their lines of credit. They're starting to utilize these net 30 accounts to be able to purchase what they need and then pay for it at the end of the month. And 2, we're building them a credit history. So just like us as individuals, when we're young, we have secured credit cards and we have co-signers and stuff like this. That's basically, we're taking our clients through the exact same process of building up their credit reports and building up their scores by helping them get approved for actual lines of credit with banks and vendors, so that they can build their credit history and get to the point that they can get approved just based on the credit history of the business itself without the personal guarantee.
Now, on the business end, do they have to maintain a balance to get more points as far as their credit score as a business? Or can they pay it off every month and just having the line where they're using it and paying it off, it's fine?
It's not having to necessarily maintain a balance, but there has to be activity on an account. So, business credit, the business credit scores, they call it the Paydex score, is what is. So, I like to equate it to the personal side because it's pretty similar. But on the personal side, you have FICO scores, and so FICO is the algorithm that scores it, and so they've got different criteria for the FICO score that qualify clients and or come up with, they calculate the actual credit score. The Paydex score is what's used for business, and it's ran from a scale of 0 to 100. So it's just like a report card when you were in school. If you got a 90% or better, you're an A. If you got an 80 to 90, you're a B. 7 to, it's the same thing. It's just a scorecard. It's just basically a report card for your business. But what it's based on, so with the personal credit, it's based on a 7-year history. So it's looking at data from 7 years ago to today, and it's calculating the good and the bad and the ugly and figuring out your score based on that. Your business credit score is based on a 12-month history. So instead of it taking you 7 years to build a great credit history, it only takes 12 months with the business side, because businesses function a lot different than the consumers do. So they're not necessarily looking at how much of a balance that you're maintaining. They're more concerned about how fast are you making your payments? Are you making them on time or sooner? So, if I'm talking to a business owner who may have a couple accounts, who may be have missed some payments or fallen behind, instead of it being like this long drawn out process of trying to offset and maybe even getting into dispute tactics, things like that, it's more about, look, just go out and make your payments on time. Add a couple more accounts if you need to. Pay them early, get to the point where you're paying them, 10 days early, and it's going to improve your credit scores that quick and easy. Paying off the balances does help, because with any sort of credit reporting, if they see that you're carrying large balances over time, it's a risk indicator. Because the way any of the banks, like the reason they consider that a risk indicator, and what most people don't realize, is that when you're carrying a large balance, it means that you're heavily relying on your credit to make purchases. And that's a risk indicator, because banks are going to look at that and go, hey, why do you need to be using $10,000 out of $12,000 available? Why are you not paying that down? Opposed to using credit as a tool, using it as something where you're purchasing it, paying it off, and using it as a cash flow management tool, rather than using it for big purchases and things that you can't afford to buy with cash.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it's only a year to get things straightened out or improved. That sounds great.
Right. Right. And it really is. And you have to think about it with the business. The opportunity for cash flow is so much more significant than it is personally, because most individuals that you talk to in the United States, outside of entrepreneurs and commissioned salespeople, they're on a salary. So they've got fixed budgets, fixed expenses. They know they have a consistency, they have a pattern, they know how much is going to come in and how much is going to go out. With a business, you can hit one contract and you can exponentially skyrocket your gross revenue and your income coming in. So it's just a completely different dynamic of how it functions altogether. And they take that into consideration, because just like any credit reporting, they're not looking at what your income is, or what your budget is. They're solely calculating everything for the risk factor based off of your payment history and the data they're collecting on the accounts that you have.
So if you have a relationship with a bank and you've got a credit card from your bank, you know, does that report into this system?
It depends. Every bank is different. Every card is different. Every account is different. There are some accounts that may just report to Dun and Bradstreet. There are some that may just report to Equifax. There's some that report to all three of them. It depends on the bank. Like, a lot of the major banks don't actually report to the business credit bureaus, and the reason is because it's not required to. And the lending factors in business they're so drastically different than the lending standards with consumers, that the business credit reporting has just now starting to get to a point where it's gaining a lot of momentum, and getting to the point where banks are looking at this going, hey, we can essentially bypass our risk factors and risk levels if we start scoring this and we start calculating it the same as we do on the consumer side. So there's what we're starting to see is that banks are starting to get smart to this. They're starting to understand that, using the actual scoring models and using the credit reports that are there, they can lend just off of that, even if it's smaller businesses.
So if I'm a small business and I'm growing the business, and let's say I'm up around $1 million, whatever, and I want to
Mhm.
grow some more aggressively, it sounds like you guys have some lenders who I could actually use as kind of like factoring that I was managing internally, but not formally factoring. In other words, I could, create a line of credit. I could work against that line of credit, just continue to pay it off regularly each month, a lot less costly than factoring,
Right.
and then really continue to scale the business. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one things that we like to help our clients with is understand that, when you're on the business side, when you're operating with credit, it's not that you're using this to go out and buy furniture and buy all this stuff that you don't necessarily need or can pay cash. Because again, with the business, you have the ability to scale rapidly, have good months of sales, accumulate cash a lot faster. But where credit really becomes a powerful tool, and the most powerful tool for a business, is when it's used to level out the monthly cash flow. So instead of being dependent on massive peaks and valleys in your sales cycle and whatever is going on with society, or whatever is going on with any of the markets, instead of being reliant on that, you've got your credit system, you've got your credit lines that are maintaining the stability of your business, and then you can manage your cash flow based on what your sales look like. So instead of it being something where you're constantly month to month, just relying on whatever sales that are coming in, and just operating based off that, you're operating off your baseline of what your credit can be, and then you're using your cash flow to be able to pay off those credit lines, which gives you a nice clean way of being able to track your profits a little easier, and a nice clean way to be able to just make sure that you're kind of leveling out those peaks and valleys in business.
So help me understand, where do you guys make money in this then? Because
Oh,
you've
we
done
charge
this
our clients to
analysis.
do this.
Okay,
This-
so there's a service fee because these
right.
individual lenders are not going to pay you anything. Is that right? Or are there
what we're
overages there?
doing what we're doing is we're doing hands-on coaching. Our
Okay.
whole mentality is we want to empower our clients to understand credit. We want to empower people to understand how to use credit, how to maximize it. Every business should be using, we believe, should be using business credit. And because it's just like on the personal side, when you're using credit cards, it mitigates your risk. It makes it where if somebody's going to steal your identity, get a hold of the card, that it's not draining your checking account, bouncing your payroll checks, and just wreaking havoc on your day-to-day operations. But it gives you that flexibility and that extra layer of security that you can run the company and not have to worry about transactions hitting your cash flow until the end of the month. The other side is that we want to be able to show people how to do this, because once you learn how to build your credit, once you learn the systems, once you learn where things are and how it operates, now we've taught people to fish, and instead of just throwing them a fish. And that's really our philosophy, is we want to empower and encourage them to use their credit for life so that they can run their businesses successfully.
So what does a typical engagement look like? How long does somebody work with you, before they're on their own? They've learned how to fish and can move on from there.
So the entire process of building credit takes about 7 to 8 months. In 7 to 8 months, we find that that's the point where you're starting that our clients are starting to access vendor credit like Ford Motor Credit, Ally Financial, where they're being able to go in and finance vehicles and equipment without the personal guarantee, and that's when the credit cards and the smaller lines of credit start to take place. We find that from there, so it's about a 7 to 8 month process to get there. The clients who have really gone, some of our top performing clients who have just taken this and run with it, they're already up to $1 million in funding after about 2 years, after 2 years of starting their business credit building. They've got well over $1 million, and almost none of it has a personal guarantee with it.
And what types of businesses are they in?
Is some coaching, consulting. We've got real estate investors who are doing this. We have a lot of trucking companies who have done really well with it because being able to finance vehicles and trailers and not having to do the personal guarantees for that opens up a lot of opportunities for a lot of these trucking companies as well. We have bakeries. I mean, we deal with any given month we'll help 600 to 700 new businesses every month with building their business credit. So you can imagine we see a whole scale of businesses that we work with.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, like on the real estate investment side, typically I think of that as more of a long-term loan. So, a lot. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that some of the credit that you're helping these people qualify for is short-term, but some of it's also long-term. And
Mhm.
as long as you're maintaining your payments, then that can continue to increase as you grow your organization.
Right. And with real estate, it's not like everybody thinks of it on the mortgage side and the actual acquisition, but there's so many costs outside of that. You've got repair costs. You blow out your HVAC unit, and now instead of having to come up with thousands of dollars from your fixed rent income, you've got lines of credit that you can put it on, and you can stretch that out a little bit over time and give yourself some more stability. You've got vehicle costs. I mean, there's just so many different costs that are associated with running any type of business that it's helping to offset that. Plus, you're right. When you start getting into commercial real estate, you start looking at apartment buildings, things like that, commercial retail malls. Those are commercially driven, and so having the business credit there can give you the opportunity to offset the personal guarantee with a lot of those.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, what else should our people know about your services and the opportunities out there, particularly in this time of COVID?
Mhm.
And how does what you're doing also affect, if at all, like the government loans, the disaster loans, or anything like that?
Well, I'll start with the government loans and like the EIDL. What we're doing is kind of outside of that. I mean, the EIDL, the PPP, that's unprecedented. I mean, we're seeing there's funding that's never happened before, and there's things happening on the liquidity side of that that's never happened before as well. I mean, it's we're what we're doing is on top of that. That's kind of, for a lot of companies, that's that injection to get through COVID, to get through the transition of everything going on. And it's very much needed. I think it was I've seen personally, I know a lot of people who it's really saved their business, and it's given them the ability to float through a lot of things that's going on. What we're doing is more of the long term. We're looking at the, hey, congratulations, you got there. Let's talk about the stability of your business afterwards, because now they're having to learn how to function differently. They're learning how to operate differently. That's kind of an injection that's helped them to stabilize and to just survive with everything going on. What we're looking at is more of the long term investment, more of the thriving side of it. And you asked me, it was some things that people should know about us. The one thing that most people miss is they're going out and they're trying to get funding for their business. The reason that 95% of the people fail at getting business for their getting credit specifically for their business without the personal guarantee is because they're not set up properly. So the way that I like to put this, David, is this: when you look at a business and an individual are essentially the same things in the government's eyes, which is why when you have an LLC, an S corp, a C corp, that it's restricting the liability of the individual. The reason is the formation of that LLC is the birth date, and that is the actual person itself. The EIN number that you get from the IRS is the social security number. The doing business as, that's the name on the birth certificate. Your fictitious name registration, that's the name. The credit reports are separate. It is a whole separate entity. It is a whole separate person. And if you stripped away the humanity side of it, essentially on paper, they're both the same things. The problem is that when business owners get started, they're like, hey, I'm going to use my Gmail address over here on my business. And hey, I'm going to use my personal address and my cell phone number over here on the business. So what's happening is that when they're applying, banks are looking at it going, you're not a business, you're a person.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the person that operates out of their home? Should they then have rent small office space or rent a PO box at a UPS place or
Not a
whatever?
PO box, a virtual address.
Virtual address.
A virtual address is the way to go. And nobody really, banks and lenders don't care if you work from home. It's just their underwriting guidelines. Their underwriting guidelines were written before, working from home was cool. This has become a new fad that everybody, that everybody's kind of, I think, loves now, and most people are really stuck on. But the banks and lenders, they want to see that they want to make sure that, and it's not much. I mean, I think you can spend maybe $20 a month with like a Regis or Alliance virtual offices, places like that, that will give you an actual suite number. They'll give you a receptionist. They'll work through all of that. So that's one of the small expenses. And the other side is like a phone system. You want a phone system, a fax number, make sure that you're listed on 411. The way that I always like to explain it to people is, look, you need to make it so easy for these banks and lenders to find you that they've got absolutely no question about where you are and what you do. Because as soon as they can look up your business name and you pull up on 411, they can see your website, they can see, they see social media. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the validity of at the end of the day, David, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that you're not some guy sitting in his basement just trying to get money without actually running a business.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I'm wondering if you recommend any virtual CFOs, accountants, CPAs type of thing, or do you just, encourage everyone, please have a good accounting support system in place as you're going through this? Because you're not only dealing with getting more credit, but you got to manage it well. And
right.
So you're helping them a certain extent, but also someone who's really diving maybe deeper into the numbers may be required for some people to have the proper discipline.
I always think that's a great idea, but I try not to advise my clients on it because that's their side of their business. We really stick to the credit side. We just tell them, look,
Okay.
this is how your credit works. Here's how it runs. We have a lot of conversations with CFOs, just helping them to understand it and help them to get there. But at the end of the day, we really focus on staying in our lane of we help with the credit. That's what we specialize in.
Well, I think this sounds like it's got a lot of value where you can help business owners and startups build this credit so they don't have to personally guarantee it. That's a huge risk. I've eaten that one in the past myself. And so I think that's great. Where can people learn more about what you're doing?
It's very easy. We're at creditsuite.com. So it's credit and then suite, SUITE.com. And we've got free downloads. If you search for us, we're all over the internet. We've got hundreds of videos on YouTube, thousands of podcasts. I mean, we are out and about everywhere.
Plenty to learn, plenty to see. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. This has been very educational. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of our entrepreneurs.
I appreciate you having me on today, David.
Okay, take care.